Chapter 1. The Girl Who Wouldn't Shift. The iron shackles bit into Sera's wrists as two guards dragged her across the marble floor of the grand hall. Her bare feet scraped against cold stone, leaving faint streaks of blood that would be scrubbed away before dawn. Above her, crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across the vaulted ceiling, each flicker of light a silent witness to her humiliation. 4 years. She'd managed to hide for 4 years. "On your knees," Commander Vex growled, shoving her forward. Sera stumbled but caught herself, refusing to fall. Not here, not in front of them. The Grand Hall was packed with shifters from every major pack in the Northern Territories. Their eyes gleamed with predatory interest, some curious, others hostile, all of them waiting for the spectacle to begin. The air was thick with the musk of wolves barely contained beneath human skin, a suffocating reminder that she was the only one in this room who couldn't shift. Who wouldn't shift? At the far end of the hall, elevated on a dais of black obsidian, sat the Alpha King, Kael Thornridge. Even seated, he commanded the space with an authority that needed no words. His dark hair was pulled back from a face carved from shadow and stone, all sharp angles and controlled power. Eyes the color of liquid silver swept the room before settling on her, and Sera felt the impact like a physical blow. She'd seen him before, of course. Everyone had. The Alpha King who'd united the fractured packs through blood and diplomacy, whose very name made rival alphas bow their heads. But she'd never been this close, never felt the full weight of his presence pressing against her like a living thing. His voice rolled through the hall, deep and resonant, silencing the murmurs instantly. "You stand accused of refusing the sacred rite of transformation." Sera lifted her chin, meeting those silver eyes with every ounce of defiance she possessed. A ripple of shock moved through the crowd. One didn't speak back to the Alpha King. One certainly didn't do it with that tone. Kael's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his gaze. Was it amusement? Irritation? "The law is clear. Every shifter of age must complete their first transformation before the council." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Vex backhanded her across the face, the crack of impact echoing through the sudden silence. Sera's head snapped to the side, copper flooding her mouth, but she didn't cry out. She'd learned long ago that tears only encouraged them. Kael's single word carried more authority than a shouted command. Vex stepped back immediately, though his hand remained clenched at his side. "Miss Ashford, your bloodline is documented. Your mother was Lissa Ashford, daughter of the Silver Moon Pack. Your father was Marcus Ashford, Beta to the Mountain Ridge Alpha, both royal bloodlines, both powerful shifters." Sera forced the words past the tightness in her throat. Kael rose from his throne in one fluid movement, descending the dais steps with the grace of a predator. The crowd parted before him like water. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that she could smell him. Pine and winter storms and something darker. Something that made her pulse quicken traitorously. His presence was overwhelming, pushing against her mental shields with an intensity that made her dizzy. "Look at me," he commanded softly. Sera kept her gaze fixed on the middle distance, on a point somewhere past his left shoulder. If she looked directly at him, if she met those eyes again, she wasn't sure she could hold the walls in place. And if the walls fell... The Alpha command rolled over her like thunder, and her body obeyed before her mind could protest. Her eyes snapped to his, and the world tilted sideways. For one horrible, infinite moment, she felt it. The wolf inside her, the one she'd been drowning in silence and suppression for 4 agonizing years. It surged against her ribcage like a living creature desperate to break free, recognizing something in him that terrified her more than anything else. Mate, no, 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 this couldn't be happening. Not him, anyone but him. Kael's eyes widened fractionally, the only sign that he'd felt it too. The mate bond snapping into place between them with the inevitability of gravity, binding them together in ways that went beyond choice or reason. "Impossible," he breathed. Sera wrenched her gaze away, breaking the connection with physical effort. Her whole body was shaking now, the wolf clawing at her insides, demanding to be acknowledged. She bit down hard on her tongue, using pain to maintain control. "Please," she whispered, hating the weakness in her voice. Something shifted in Kael's expression. A softening she hadn't expected, but when he spoke again, his voice was implacable. I have no choice. Neither do you. The council demands proof of your nature. Exile. The word should have brought relief, freedom from this world of claws and dominance and blood. But exile meant the human cities, where lone shifters went mad from isolation. It meant severing the last threads connecting her to her parents' memory. It meant running forever, and now, impossibly, it meant leaving her mate. The admission cost her everything. The declaration fell into silence so complete Sera could hear her own heartbeat. Kael stared at her, and for the first time she saw genuine uncertainty cross his features. Explain, he demanded. Sera closed her eyes, the memory rising like bile, blood on snow, screaming that wouldn't stop. Her mother's broken body and her father's sightless eyes, and above it all, the howl of a creature that shouldn't exist. No, she said simply. Exile me. Kill me. I don't care. Again, the word registered across Kael's face, so she had shifted before, which meant she was lying about something, but what? He studied her for a long moment, this strange, defiant woman who somehow carried his mate mark despite being completely human in this moment. Every instinct screamed at him to protect her, to pull her close and tear apart anyone who'd put that haunted look in her eyes. But he was Alpha King before he was anything else. He had responsibilities. Laws. 3 days, he said finally. I'm granting you 3 days to prepare yourself. On the night of the full moon, you will shift before the council in the sacred circle. This is not a request, Sera Ashford. He turned to Vex. Remove her shackles. My king, Vex protested. As the shackles fell away, Sera rubbed her raw wrists and finally met Kael's eyes again. This time she held his gaze, letting him see the truth there even if she wouldn't speak it aloud. You're going to regret this. But Kael only smiled, a cold, determined expression that promised he always got what he wanted. 3 days, Miss Ashford. As the guards led her away, neither of them acknowledged the invisible thread now binding them together, pulling tighter with every step of distance. Neither admitted that the mate bond complicated everything. But they both felt it. A connection that transcended reason, a fate neither had asked for, and a secret that might destroy them both. Chapter 2. The North Wing. The North Wing was less a prison and more a gilded cage. Sera stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of her assigned chambers, watching moonlight paint silver streaks across the mountain peaks in the distance. The room was larger than the entire apartment she'd been hiding in for the past year, all dark wood and soft furs, with a fireplace that crackled with perpetual warmth. Beautiful, comfortable, suffocating. She pressed her palm against the cold glass, feeling the wolf stir restlessly beneath her skin. It had been worse since the mate bond snapped into place. The creature inside her was awake now, prowling the edges of her consciousness, drawn to him like iron to a lodestone. Mate, mate, mate. The word echoed through her mind in a voice that wasn't quite her own, primal, insistent, hungry. Shut up, Sera whispered to herself. To it, to the part of her she'd been drowning for 4 years. A knock at the door made her spin around, heart hammering. She'd dismissed the servants an hour ago, insisting she needed nothing, wanted nothing except to be left alone with her thoughts and her rapidly crumbling control. The voice was unmistakable, deep, resonant, and far too close. Every instinct screamed at her to say no, but you didn't refuse an Alpha King, mate bond or not. It's your palace, she said, hating how breathless she sounded. The door opened and Kael stepped inside. He'd changed from his formal ceremonial robes into simpler clothes, dark pants and a loose shirt that somehow made him look more dangerous, not less. Without the trappings of kingship, he was just a man whose presence filled the room like smoke, whose silver eyes tracked her every micro-movement with predatory precision. He closed the door behind him with a soft click that seemed deafening in the silence. You should be resting, Kael said, moving to the small table near the fireplace. He set down a tray she hadn't noticed he was carrying, tea, bread, cheese, fruit. The question came out sharper than intended. He poured tea into 2 cups with steady hands. Cream? The domesticity of the question was so incongruous that Sera almost laughed. Here stood the most powerful alpha in the Northern Territories, asking about her tea preferences like they were old friends. Neither, she said carefully. He held out a cup to her, and when she didn't take it, he set it on the windowsill beside her. There was no heat in his words, just absolute certainty. Sera's hands clenched into fists. You can't force a shift. He took a sip of his own tea, watching her over the rim. The word hung between them, acknowledged for the first time since that moment in the grand hall. I didn't ask for this, Sera said quietly. Kael set down his cup with deliberate care. But here we are. Something dangerous flashed through his eyes. The honest answer was no. Even now, every cell in her body was aware of him, the heat of his presence, the rhythm of his breathing, the scent of pine and winter that made her wolf whine with longing. The mate bond was a living thing, growing stronger with every passing moment they spent in proximity. But rejection would kill them both slowly, she knew, a half-life of phantom pain and endless yearning. Sera asked instead of answering. You're not a prisoner. Kael moved closer, and Sera forced herself not to retreat. Do you know what they were saying about you in the hall after you left? She could imagine. Shifter society had little tolerance for those who rejected their nature. It was seen as an insult to the wolf, a denial of the gift the moon goddess had bestowed. He stopped an arm's length away, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his silver eyes. You stood before the entire council and basically declared yourself an abomination. The words came out hollow. The use of her first name sent a shiver down her spine. He'd called her Miss Ashford before, maintained that careful distance of formality. But now, alone in this room with moonlight streaming through the windows, they were just Kael and Sera, two people trapped by fate. The confession slipped out before she could stop it. Kael went very still, his expression unreadable. Tell me what happened, he said softly. She spun away from him, crossing to the far side of the room. Her chest was heaving, the wolf surging against her control. Too close. He was too close, and the bond was pulling at her, making her want things she couldn't afford to want. Silence stretched between them, taut as a wire. Then Kael spoke, his voice gentler than she'd heard it. Sera froze, shock cutting through her panic. Theron had challenged him for the throne, Kael continued quietly. It's allowed under pack law, trial by combat. But Theron was stronger, faster. He should have won. She turned slowly to find Kael staring into the fireplace, his profile cast in flickering gold. He used wolfsbane to weaken Theron before the fight. I saw him do it, saw him slip the poison into my brother's wine the night before. His jaw clenched. Theron died in the circle, and my father declared it a righteous kill. The pack celebrated. Sera whispered. Kael finally looked at her, and the raw pain in his eyes stole her breath. Because I know what it's like to carry a secret that feels like it will destroy you. He crossed the distance between them in 3 strides, stopping just short of touching her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. But I also know that secrets have a way of coming out regardless. His hand lifted, hovering near her cheek, not quite making contact. Trust me, Sera. The mate bond thrummed between them, urging her to close that final distance, to lean into his touch, to tell him everything, to let someone else carry the weight for just a moment. But she'd seen what monsters could do. She'd felt her wolf tear through flesh and bone with savage joy. She'd stood over the bodies of everyone she loved and known, with horrible certainty that she had killed them. You can't help me, she said, taking a step back, away from his warmth, away from the promise in his eyes. Kael's hand fell to his side. For a moment, disappointment flickered across his features before his mask of control slid back into place. 3 days, he reminded her. That's all you have. He turned and walked to the door, and Sera felt the absence of him like a physical ache. But at the threshold, he paused. For what it's worth, I don't believe you're a monster. Then he was gone, leaving Sera alone with the echoes of his words and the terrible, treacherous hope they'd planted in her chest. Chapter 3: Midnight Confessions. Sera woke to the sound of screaming, her own screaming. She bolted upright in the massive bed, sheets twisted around her legs, her body slick with sweat despite the cool night air. The nightmare clung to her like cobwebs, her mother's face twisted in terror, her father's hand reaching for her, always reaching but never quite touching. And blood, so much blood, painting the snow crimson under a full moon's pitiless gaze. You did this. You killed them. Monster, monster, monster. A knock shattered the silence. Kael. Of course it was Kael. The mate bond probably broadcast her distress like a beacon across the entire palace. She didn't answer, couldn't answer past the tightness in her throat. But the door opened anyway. She should have known he'd have a key. And suddenly he was there, backlit by the hallway's dim glow. "Get out," she managed, hating how her voice shook. Instead, he closed the door and crossed to her bedside. He'd clearly been sleeping. His hair was disheveled, his shirt untucked. Something about seeing him rumpled and human made her chest ache worse than the nightmare had. He sat on the edge of the bed without asking permission, and Sera was too shattered to protest. She pulled her knees to her chest, making herself small. "Ozzy schemes." The perceptiveness of the question shouldn't have surprised her. An alpha didn't lead packs through obliviousness. The single word carried weight. "Sees." The mate bond pulsed between them, warm and insistent. Sera closed her eyes against it, but that only made her more aware of his presence, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the heat of his body so close to hers. "Tell me about them," Kael said quietly. She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze with something close to defiance. "Why do you care? You have a kingdom to run, packs to manage." Something flickered across Kael's expression, hurt maybe, though it was gone too quickly to be certain. He shifted closer and she felt the bed dip under his weight. "You're my mate. That supersedes politics, supersedes everything. The moment that bond snapped into place, you became the most important person in my world, whether you like it or not." The raw honesty in his voice caught her off guard. She'd expected dominance, commands, the weight of an alpha's authority. Not this quiet vulnerability, this admission that he was as trapped by fate as she was. "I don't want to be important," Sera whispered. "I want to be invisible. Safe." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Kael went very still. "Tell me," he said again, but this time it wasn't a command. It was a plea, and maybe it was the nightmare still clinging to her thoughts, or the mate bond making her defenses crumble, or simply the exhaustion of carrying this weight alone for 4 years. But something inside Sera finally broke. "It was the night of my first shift," she heard herself say. "My 18th birthday. The pack gathered for the ceremony. It's supposed to be a celebration, you know." Kael nodded, not interrupting. His hand rested on the bed between them, close enough to touch but not touching. An offer, not a demand. Sera stared at that hand, at the long fingers and calloused palm. Strong hands, hands that had probably killed but also protected. Everyone said it would be beautiful, natural, but something felt wrong from the moment the moon rose. My wolf felt different, too big. Her breath hitched, and she felt Kael shift closer. Still not touching, but his presence was a solid warmth beside her. My mother sensed it first. She tried to call off the ceremony, but the pack Alpha, he was old-fashioned, traditional, said we couldn't insult the moon goddess by stopping. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. I shifted. And it wasn't like the stories. There was no beauty, no grace, just pain, blinding, tearing pain. And then I wasn't me anymore. I was something else, something that lived only to hunt. The memory crashed over her like a wave, the sensation of her bones breaking and reforming, the world exploding into scent and sound and savage instinct. And underneath it all, a hunger that had nothing to do with food and everything to do with blood. She couldn't say it, couldn't give voice to that final image that haunted her every sleeping and waking moment. But Kael understood. His hand finally closed over hers, warm and steady, and she didn't pull away. "Your wolf killed them," he said softly. The confession ripped out of her. "My mother, my father, the pack alpha, 3 enforcers who tried to stop me. I slaughtered my entire pack, and I don't even remember most of it. Just fragments, screaming, the taste of copper, my mother's eyes as She broke off, pressing her free hand to her mouth, fighting the urge to be sick. Kael's thumb moved across her knuckles in slow, soothing circles. "I ran. I've been running ever since. Different cities, different names, always moving before anyone could figure out what I was. I learned to suppress the wolf, to keep it locked down so deep it couldn't surface." Kael's voice was troubled. "Sera, that kind of suppression is dangerous. The wolf needs to be acknowledged, integrated." She finally looked at him, letting him see the absolute certainty in her eyes. "Don't you understand? I'm not afraid of the transformation itself. I'm afraid of what I become when I shift. That thing inside me, it's not a wolf." The word was firm, absolute. "You weren't there." His free hand came up to cup her face, forcing her to maintain eye contact. "I can feel you through the mate bond, Sera. Every emotion, every thought. And there's no monster in you." "It was my wolf, my shift." His thumb brushed away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "A child attempting her first transformation. Something went wrong, yes, but that doesn't make you evil." The word shattered something inside her. A victim, not a murderer, not a monster. A victim. "I killed them," she whispered, but the conviction was weaker now. Kael's silver eyes searched hers. Or did something else kill them? The question sent ice down her spine. First shifts don't go catastrophically wrong without reason. His expression was grave. "Sera, I think someone did something to you, cursed you, or poisoned you, or manipulated the ritual somehow." The possibility had never occurred to her. 4 years of guilt, of self-hatred, of believing herself fundamentally broken, and he was suggesting it might not have been her fault at all. Kael's hands were steady on her face, grounding her. "But first, you need to shift again. Safely, in a controlled environment, with me there to anchor you." Terror spiked through her. "No." His forehead touched hers, and the mate bond flared between them, strong and sure. "I'll be with you every moment. If your wolf loses control, I'll bring you back. I'm the Alpha King." The hint of dry humor in his voice made her lips twitch despite everything. "Trust me, Sera." She wanted to. Moon above, she wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't the monster she'd believed herself to be for 4 years. But trust was a luxury she'd learned to live without. "I don't know how," she admitted. And there, in the quiet darkness with only moonlight as their witness, Kael Thornridge did something no Alpha King should ever do. He told her his truth. The words fell into the space between them like stones into still water. Sera's breath caught, her eyes searching Kael's face for any sign of deception. But there was only raw honesty there, edged with old pain. She whispered. Kael's hand slipped from her face, and he leaned back against the headboard, his gaze fixed on something distant, only he could see. "After Theron's death, I spent 6 years watching my father destroy everything our family had built. He ruled through fear and brutality, executing anyone who questioned his authority." Sera found herself shifting closer despite herself, drawn by the weight of his confession. His jaw tightened. "But I grew, and the older I got, the more I understood what my silence had cost. Not just Theron, but everyone who suffered under my father's reign." He finally looked at her, and the self-recrimination in his silver eyes was a mirror of her own. "On my 18th birthday, my father announced he would continue the tradition. He demanded I challenge someone for my rite of passage, some weaker wolf I could easily defeat to prove my dominance. He chose a young Omega from the river pack." Sera's hand found his without conscious thought, their fingers intertwining. Through the mate bond, she felt the echo of his anguish from that moment. "I couldn't do it," Kael continued quietly. "I refused the challenge. My father was furious, said I was weak, unworthy of the Thornridge name." His voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Trial by combat," Sera breathed. It should have been impossible. He was stronger, more experienced. He'd killed challengers twice my size without breaking a sweat. Kael's free hand moved to his chest, over his heart. Righteous anger. The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of confession. The fight lasted 20 minutes, Kael said. 20 minutes of blood and fury in the ceremonial circle, with every pack alpha in the territory watching. You saved that girl's life, Sera said softly. His laugh was bitter. Or did I just become another version of him? He turned to face her fully, and she saw the torment there. I tell myself it's for the good of the packs, that order requires firm leadership. But sometimes I look in the mirror and I see him staring back, the same ruthlessness. Sera studied his face in the moonlight, the strong jaw, the silver eyes that had seen too much too young, the weight of a crown that sat heavy even when invisible. And she understood suddenly why fate had bound them together. They were both prisoners of their own guilt, both carrying the weight of deaths they believed they'd caused, both terrified of the monsters they thought they might become. You're not your father, she said firmly. She squeezed his hand, feeling the mate bond pulse warmly between them. Monsters don't agonize over their choices. They don't lose sleep wondering if they're doing the right thing. The intensity in his voice made her breath hitch. Maybe not the details of your life, not yet. He pressed her hand against his chest, over his heart. I feel your fear, your guilt, your desperate need to protect others, even at the cost of your own happiness. That's not a monster, Sera. He leaned closer, his forehead touching hers again, in that gesture that was becoming familiar, comforting. And I need you to see it, because in 2 days, you're going to have to face your worst fear. Tears burned behind Sera's eyes. What if I hurt someone? His hand came up to cradle her face again, thumb brushing across her cheekbone. Because I'll be inside the circle with you. The image of Kael standing between her wolf and potential victims sent ice through her veins. No, absolutely not. The alpha command threaded through his words, gentle but immovable. I'm your mate, your alpha. The word tasted bitter. Is that all this is? Something flickered in his expression. Hurt, frustration, and underneath it all, something warmer. Something that made her pulse quicken despite the gravity of their conversation. Kael asked, his voice rough. The possessive rasp in those words sent shivers down her spine. Because the moment that bond snapped into place, everything changed. Because I look at you, and I don't see a problem to be solved or a political embarrassment to be managed. I see my mate, my equal. Sera's breath caught. Kael, I know it's too fast, he continued, the words tumbling out like he couldn't hold them back. I know you don't trust me yet, don't even really know me. But the bond doesn't lie, Sera. What I feel when I'm near you, the way my wolf recognizes yours even when you're suppressing it, that's real. He searched her eyes. Tell me you don't feel it. Tell me your wolf isn't clawing at your ribcage right now, desperate to get closer to me. She couldn't tell him that, because it would be a lie. The truth was, she'd never felt more alive than she did in this moment, sitting in moonlight with this complicated, damaged, surprisingly gentle man who understood her guilt because he carried his own. The mate bond wasn't just attraction or instinct, it was recognition, soul calling to soul across whatever cosmic distance separated them before. I'm scared, she whispered. His thumb traced her lower lip and her breath stuttered. But you don't have to be scared alone anymore. Let me carry some of the weight. And if I can't control it? He leaned closer, his breath warm against her lips. But I don't believe that's what we'll find. I think when you shift in 2 days, surrounded by protection and anchored by the mate bond, you're going to discover that your wolf isn't a monster. His hand slid into her hair, gentle but possessive. Right now, in this moment, your wolf is closer to the surface than you've let her be in years. Sera shook her head mutely. Longing, loneliness. His silver eyes burned into hers. She's not a monster, Sera. A tear slipped down her cheek and Kael caught it with his thumb. Let me bring you both into the light, he murmured. Trust me. And there, with the mate bond singing between them and moonlight painting them both silver, Sera felt the walls she'd built around her heart begin to crack. Not crumble, not yet, but crack enough to let hope seep through. 2 days, she said softly. 2 days, he agreed, and I'll be with you every moment until then, teaching you, protecting you. He smiled, and it transformed his face from austere to almost boyish. Starting tomorrow. He moved to stand, but Sera's hand tightened on his. Stay, she heard herself say. Kael went very still. Her cheeks heated. I don't want to be alone. The bond will help, he finished quietly. Understanding dawned in his eyes. Having your mate close soothes the wolf. Instead of answering, Kael settled back against the headboard and opened his arms in clear invitation. Sera hesitated only a moment before curling into his side, her head finding the hollow of his shoulder, as if it had been made for exactly that purpose. His arm wrapped around her, solid and warm, and the mate bond settled into something that felt almost like peace. Sleep, he murmured against her hair, and for the first time in 4 years, Sera believed him. Chapter 5. Learning to Trust. Dawn broke soft and golden across the mountains, spilling through the windows in honey-colored streams. Sera woke slowly, awareness returning in layers. The warmth surrounding her, the steady heartbeat beneath her ear, the pine and winter scent that had become achingly familiar overnight. Kael. She was wrapped around him like a vine, one leg thrown over his, her hand fisted in his shirt. He was still asleep, his features relaxed in a way she'd never seen when he was awake. He looked younger like this, less king, more man. Carefully, she tried to extract herself without waking him. His voice was rough with sleep, his arm tightening around her waist. It's morning. His eyes opened, silver in the early light, and the look he gave her was so unguarded it stole her breath. The admission felt like a small miracle. A smile tugged at his lips. The word mate still sent a thrill through her, half terror and half something she wasn't ready to name. Sera forced herself to sit up, putting necessary distance between them even as her wolf whined in protest. So, she said, aiming for casual and missing by miles. Kael sat up as well, running a hand through his disheveled hair. Even rumpled and half awake, he carried an authority that made her pulse quicken. I did, but first, breakfast. He swung his legs off the bed, moving with predatory grace toward the door. Meet me in the East Gardens in an hour. Kael. He paused at the threshold, looking back with an expression that was part challenge, part invitation. Trust me, remember? Then he was gone, leaving Sera alone with her racing thoughts and the lingering warmth where his body had pressed against hers. An hour later, Sera made her way through the palace's winding corridors to the East Gardens. She'd found clothing in the wardrobe, soft leather pants and a loose tunic that allowed for movement. Everything fit perfectly, which meant Kael had planned this. The gardens were more wild than manicured, with native mountain flowers growing in organized chaos among the carefully placed stones. A small stream bubbled through the center, and the air smelled of pine and early morning dew. Kael was waiting by the stream, dressed similarly in training clothes that emphasized the lean muscle of his frame. Beside him stood a woman Sera didn't recognize, tall and weathered, with silver streaking through her dark hair and eyes that saw too much. Kael gestured her forward. This is Elder Mira. The woman studied Sera with an intensity that made her want to squirm. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled. Mira, Kael warned, but there was no real heat in it. What? Mira turned her penetrating gaze back to Sera. Child, I understand you're frightened of your wolf. Sera stiffened. He had no right. He had every right, Mira interrupted gently. If we're going to help you, we need to understand what we're dealing with. She leaned closer, lowering her voice conspiratorially. Mira held up 3 gnarled fingers, and every single one of them involved external interference. Curses, poisons, dark magic. Natural wolves don't slaughter their own packs, girl. The words echoed what Kael had suggested last night, but hearing them from this ancient, knowing woman carried different weight. Your wolf is suppressed, Mira corrected. There's a difference. She gestured to a flat stone by the stream. Sera glanced at Kael, who nodded encouragingly, before crossing to sit where indicated. Mira knelt beside her, placing one weathered hand on Sera's chest over her heart. Close your eyes. Breathe. I don't trust us, Kael said softly from behind her. Sera closed her eyes. Mira's power was different from Kael's, less commanding, more like a gentle current pulling her deeper into herself. Sera felt the elder's consciousness brush against hers, questing downward toward the place where she'd buried her wolf. And for the first time in 4 years, Sera didn't fight it. She let Mira in. The elder gasped. "Oh, child!" Sera's eyes snapped open. Mira's expression was troubled. "She's not dangerous, Sera." The word hit like a physical blow. Mira's hand remained over Sera's heart, and now she could feel it too, a faint flutter, weak and desperate. "She's barely conscious anymore. Another few months and she'll fade completely." "That's what I wanted," Sera whispered, but the words felt hollow. Mira challenged. Kael moved to crouch beside them, his hand finding Sera's. "Let me feel," he said quietly. Mira nodded and withdrew. Kael took her place, his palm warm over Sera's heart. Through the mate bond, she felt his consciousness reaching for hers, gentle but inexorable. And then he was there, in that deep place where she'd locked her wolf away. Sera felt the moment he found her, felt his shock, his anger, his grief. Through his eyes, she saw what he saw, not the monster she'd imagined, but a creature curled in on itself, whimpering in the dark, small, hurt, terrified. "Oh, love," Kael breathed. The wolf stirred at his voice, lifting a muzzle toward him with desperate hope. And Sera felt something she hadn't felt in 4 years, her wolf's emotions, separate from her own. Not bloodlust, not hunger, loneliness, confusion, pain, and beneath it all, a question that made her chest ache. "Why did you leave me alone?" Tears streamed down Sera's face. "But who protected me?" The question broke something inside her. All this time she'd thought she was suppressing a monster, but she'd been imprisoning a victim, a part of herself that had been as traumatized by that night as she was. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Kael's hand tightened on hers. "She needs to come out, Sera. Not in 2 days for the ceremony. Now." His silver eyes held hers, steady and sure. "I won't let anything happen. To you, or to her, or to anyone else." "The Alpha King doesn't make promises lightly," Mira added. "And he's never broken one." Sera looked between them, this man who'd become impossibly important in less than 2 days, and this wise woman who'd seen 70 years of wolf politics and still believed in redemption. Behind them, the sun climbed higher, painting everything gold. 2 days until the ceremony, 2 days until she'd be forced to shift in front of the entire council. Or she could do it now, here, with only people she was beginning to trust. The word came out barely audible. Kael's smile was gentle. "The same way you do anything difficult. One small step at a time. First, we teach you to feel your wolf again without fear. Then we teach you to communicate with her." He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that sent warmth flooding through her. "But I don't think you will, because now you know the truth. Your wolf isn't your enemy, Sera." Mira stood, brushing dirt from her pants. "I'll prepare the warding circle, just in case, but I agree with the Alpha." As the elder moved away to begin her preparations, Sera turned to Kael. "Why are you doing this?" He said it simply, as if that explained everything. And maybe it did. "Because I see myself in you, someone carrying guilt that isn't theirs to carry. Because when I look at you, I don't see weakness or danger, I see strength, courage. You survived 4 years of slowly killing a part of yourself to protect others." He stood, pulling her up with him. "But now it's time to stop surviving and start living. Let me help you." The us encompassed more than just him and Mira. It meant pack, family, belonging, things Sera had given up the night her world shattered. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." Kael's smile was like sunrise. And as Mira began chanting the ancient words to create a protective circle, Sera realized that for the first time in 4 years, she wasn't facing her demons alone. Chapter 6. Breaking the Chains. The warding circle glowed with soft silver light, ancient runes carved into the earth pulsing with protective magic. Sera stood at its center, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. "Remember," Mira called from outside the circle, "this is just contact. You're not shifting?" Sera nodded, not trusting her voice. Beside her, Kael took her hand. "I'm right here," he murmured. "The moment it becomes too much, squeeze my hand." The absolute certainty in his voice steadied her. "Close your eyes, Sera. Breathe. Feel the ground beneath your feet, the sun on your face. You're safe. She's safe." Sera closed her eyes and tried to believe him. At first, there was nothing but darkness and the familiar weight of suppression she'd maintained for so long. But then Kael's thumb stroked across her knuckles, and she felt something shift inside her, a loosening, like a knot beginning to unravel. "Good," Kael said softly. "Now reach down, not with your mind, but with your heart." Sera let herself sink deeper, past the layers of fear and guilt, past the walls she'd built brick by careful brick. And there, in the darkness she'd created, she felt it. A flicker. Weak, barely alive. Her wolf. "I'm here," Sera thought, not knowing if the creature could even hear her anymore. I'm so sorry I left you alone." The wolf stirred, and Sera felt a surge of emotion that wasn't her own. Confusion, hope, and underneath it all, such profound loneliness it made her chest ache. "Not alone," came a whisper. Not words, exactly, but meaning translated through the bond between human and wolf. "Please, not alone." Tears leaked from Sera's closed eyes. Kael's free hand came to rest on the small of her back, grounding her. "Share your life force with her." Sera didn't know how to do that, but the mate bond showed her, a golden thread connecting her to Kael, pulsing with warmth and vitality, and beneath it another thread, silver and frayed, connecting her to her wolf. She poured herself down that silver thread. The wolf gasped, if a wolf could gasp, and suddenly Sera could see through her eyes. Not a snarling monster, but a creature that looked disturbingly like a puppy, small, with overlarge paws and uncertain movements, trembling in the dark. "You're just a baby," Sera breathed, realization crashing over her. 4 years ago, you were just being born, and something hurt you." The memory slammed into her with the force of a freight train. She was 18 again, standing in the ceremonial circle, feeling her bones begin to break and reform. But this time, she felt what the wolf had felt. Not bloodlust, not hunger, pain, agony beyond description, like liquid fire in her veins. And with it, a presence, something dark and invasive, forcing its way into the transformation, twisting it into something unnatural, something wrong. The wolf had tried to fight it, but she was too new, too weak. And when she couldn't escape the pain, when every nerve ending screamed with violation, she'd lashed out blindly, not hunting, panicking. "Someone poisoned me," Sera gasped, her eyes flying open. "During the ceremony." Mira's expression was grim. Kael's voice was tight with fury. Through the mate bond, Sera felt his rage on her behalf. Protective, possessive, barely contained. Midnight Thorn. A corrupted version of wolfsbane that doesn't just weaken a wolf, it drives them insane. "That's been outlawed for decades," Mira said sharply. Kael's silver eyes glowed with an inner light. Sera's mind raced. "My mother was from the Silver Moon Pack, one of the oldest bloodlines in the territory, and my father was beta to a rival pack," Kael finished. "Their union would have been seen as diluting royal blood." The words should have hurt more, but mostly Sera just felt numb. Kael's hand tightened on hers. "We know the truth now, and when we find out who did this..." A low growl interrupted him. Not from either of them, but from inside Sera, her wolf. The creature had heard everything, understood everything, and where there had been only weakness and fear before, now there was something else. Anger. "Sera," Mira warned, "your wolf is stirring, you need to..." But Sera didn't pull back. For the first time in 4 years, she didn't fight the rising presence of her wolf. She welcomed it. "Let her come forward," Sera said, her voice strange to her own ears. "Just a little." "Sera, that's not..." Kael started, but she squeezed his hand. "Trust me." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, an understanding deeper than words. Slowly, Kael nodded. Sera closed her eyes again and reached for her wolf. Not to suppress or control, but to embrace. "Come here, let me see you." The wolf approached cautiously, like the frightened puppy she was. And as her presence grew stronger, Sera felt something shift in her own body. Her senses sharpened. Colors became more vivid. She could hear Mira's heartbeat from 20 feet away, smell the anxiety in her sweat. Feel the complex mixture of emotions pouring off Kael through their bond: concern, pride, desire, fear. But there was no bloodlust, no mindless hunger, just clarity, strength, and the bone-deep rightness of finally being whole. "Open your eyes," Kael said softly. Sera did. The world was transformed. Every detail stood out in sharp relief: the individual petals on flowers, the patterns in Mira's weathered skin, the exact shade of silver in Kael's eyes. And in the reflection of those eyes she saw herself, still human. But her own eyes had shifted, taking on an amber glow. Her nails had lengthened slightly into claws, and when she smiled, her canines were noticeably sharper. Partial shift, the merging of wolf and human without full transformation, Mira asked carefully. Sera took inventory. Her muscles hummed with barely contained energy. Every sense was dialed to 11. But underneath the power, there was peace. Unity between the two halves of herself that had been at war for so long. "Complete," she breathed. Kael's smile was fierce with pride. "Your wolf isn't dangerous, Sera. She never was." The wolf preened at the compliment, and Sera felt a rush of affection for this creature she'd spent so long fearing. "We're okay," she thought. "We're going to be okay." Together, her wolf agreed, not alone anymore. But as Sera stood there, basking in the wonder of reunion, a thought occurred to her. "Kael, if someone poisoned me 4 years ago during a pack ceremony, they had to be there." His expression darkened. "Which means they were pack." Cold dread settled in her stomach. "Someone who might not be happy that I survived." Mira's face had gone pale. Before anyone could answer, a sound shattered the morning peace. A howl, rising from somewhere in the palace grounds. Not a greeting or a call to gather. A warning. Kael's entire body went rigid. "That's Vex." He turned to Mira. "Get Sera back to her chambers. Lock the wards," Sera demanded, but she already knew. Felt it in the way her wolf's hackles rose, in the sudden spike of danger singing through the mate bond. Kael's eyes met hers, and she saw the Alpha King emerge in full force, no longer the gentle man who'd held her through nightmares, but a ruler ready for war. "Someone knows you're here," he said. Chapter 7. The Hunter Becomes Hunted. Sera's chambers felt like a trap. Mira had locked the wards as instructed, ancient magic shimmering across the windows and door in barely visible patterns. But instead of feeling safe, Sera paced like a caged animal, her newly awakened wolf prowling restlessly beneath her skin. "Mate in danger," the wolf insisted. "Should be with mate." "He's the Alpha King," Sera muttered to herself. But even as she said it, another howl rose from somewhere below, this one cut short in a way that made her blood run cold. Through the mate bond, she felt Kael's spike of alarm, his surge of protective fury, and underneath it all, pain. The word ripped from her throat. Her hands began to shift involuntarily, claws extending as her wolf surged forward. Mira moved to her side, one weathered hand on her shoulder. "The Alpha can take care of himself." Sera laughed, the sound bitter and sharp. "I've been staying safe for 4 years, Mira. Hiding, running, letting my wolf die so I wouldn't be a threat to anyone. And where did it get me? The people who tried to kill me are still out there, still hunting." Sera met the elder's eyes, letting her see the amber glow there. "But I'm done hiding. My wolf and I, we finally understand each other." Another pulse through the bond. Kael was fighting, moving fast, his wolf close to the surface. And there was something else. Multiple presences, hostile and coordinated. This wasn't a random attack, it was an ambush. "They're not here for the palace," Sera realized. "They're here for me." Mira's expression tightened. "All the more reason to stay put." Sera moved to the window, looking down at the palace grounds. She could see figures moving in the gardens, wolves, some in human form and some shifted, the clash of combat. "But I'm not that frightened girl anymore." She turned to face Mira fully. "You said I needed to integrate with my wolf, to stop fighting her and start working together. Well, we're together now." "Sera." But Sera was already moving to the door, her hand on the handle. Mira's voice carried command, years of pack authority. Sera looked back, and there was steel in her voice that hadn't been there before. I respect him. I'm grateful to him. She pulled on the handle. The wards resisted, burning against her palm, but she pushed harder. Her wolf rose to meet the challenge, and together they forced the magic to bend. The door swung open. Moon, help us all, Mira breathed. But she didn't try to stop her. Instead, the elder reached into her robes and pulled out a small vial. Then take this. Pure silver water, blessed under the full moon. If you get wounded, it will slow any poison in your system. Sera took the vial, tucking it into her belt. Don't thank me. Mira's expression was fierce. That boy down there has been alone for too long. He needs you. Sera nodded once, then ran. The palace corridors blurred past as she moved with speed that would have been impossible before. Her wolf guided her, following the thread of the mate bond like a compass pointing true north. Down 3 flights of stairs, through the portrait gallery, out into the courtyard, where chaos waited. Bodies littered the ground, guards mostly, wounded but alive. Commander Vex stood in the center of the courtyard, blood streaming from a gash on his temple, sword in hand as he faced 3 opponents. All wore the insignia of the Mountain Ridge Pack, her father's old pack. Stand down, Vex growled. You attack the Alpha King's guard. We're correcting a mistake, one of the attackers said. He was older, scarred, with eyes cold as winter. 4 years ago, a corrupted bloodline was supposed to be eliminated. Instead, she ran, hid. The only poison here is you, Sera said, stepping into the courtyard. All eyes turned to her. Vex's widened in alarm. She moved forward, feeling her wolf just beneath the surface, ready but controlled. You came here for me, so here I am. The scarred man smiled, and it was a predator's expression. There's nothing to talk about, half-breed. You were an abomination then. You're an abomination now. He shifted mid-lunge, bones cracking and reforming with practiced ease. The massive gray wolf that emerged was easily twice the size of a normal shifter, battle-scarred and vicious. Sera's wolf surged forward, demanding release. Let me fight, let me protect. But Sera held back, not from fear this time, but from calculation. She'd watched this wolf move. He was strong, experienced. If she shifted now, with her wolf still weak from years of suppression, she'd lose. So she'd have to be smarter. The wolf lunged. Sera dodged, her enhanced reflexes saving her as massive jaws snapped closed inches from her throat. She rolled, came up running, leading him away from Vex and the wounded guards. What are you doing? Her wolf demanded. Fight back! Not yet. Trust me. The wolf chased her through the gardens, snarling with rage. Sera could feel Kael getting closer, his presence burning bright through the bond. He was fighting his way to her, but he was too far away. She'd have to handle this herself. Sera led the wolf to the stream where she'd first connected with her wolf that morning. The warding circle was still there, its runes dark now, but the magic dormant, not gone. The wolf crashed through the tree line, saw her standing in the center of the circle, and smiled, if wolves could smile. Trapped, cornered, exactly where he wanted her. He prowled forward slowly, savoring the moment. Your mother begged too, at the end. Begged us to spare her half-breed daughter, but we knew bloodlines must be kept pure. Sera's voice was steady despite the rage building inside her. He crouched, preparing to spring. He leaped. And Sera did something she'd never thought she'd do willingly. She let go, not to run, not to hide, but to fight. The shift took her with brutal speed, bones breaking and reforming, muscles tearing and rebuilding, skin giving way to fur. But this time there was no poison twisting the transformation, no dark presence forcing her into madness. Just her and her wolf, finally, fully together. The creature that emerged wasn't the massive monster from her nightmares. She was smaller than the gray wolf, built for speed rather than power. Her fur was silver white, like moonlight given form, and her eyes glowed amber gold. Beautiful. The gray wolf's confidence faltered. This wasn't what he'd expected, a terrified girl child losing control. This was a shifter in complete command of her transformation. They collided mid-air with an impact that shook the ground. Sera was smaller, yes, but she was faster, and she had 4 years of rage to fuel her. The gray wolf snapped at her throat, but she twisted away, her claws raking across his shoulder. He howled and tried to pin her using his superior weight. but she'd been running for 4 years. She knew how to slip free. They fought in savage silence, the only sounds the clash of bodies and the occasional yelp of pain. Sera felt wounds opening on her flanks, tasted blood in her mouth, but she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. This wolf had murdered her parents, had poisoned her, had stolen 4 years of her life. She would not let him win. A massive roar split the air, and suddenly Kael was there. The Alpha King in full wolf form, black as midnight and twice the size of either combatant. His silver eyes found Sera's, and through the bond, she felt his fury, his pride, his desperate need to protect her. But she shook her head. My fight. Let me finish it. The gray wolf, realizing he was now outnumbered, tried to flee. But Sera was faster. She caught him by the throat, her jaws locking down with supernatural strength, and she held on, not killing, just holding, waiting. Kael shifted back to human form, striding forward with lethal grace. Shift, he commanded the gray wolf. The wolf obeyed, transforming back into the scarred man. Sera released him, shifting back herself, surprised by how easy the transition felt now, how natural. She stood there, naked and bloodied but unbroken, as Kael moved to her side. You disobeyed a direct order, he said, his voice rough. He stared at her for a long moment, something complex warring in his silver eyes. Then, without warning, he pulled her against him, one hand cradling the back of her head while the other wrapped around her waist. Don't ever scare me like that again, he whispered against her hair. Sera melted into him, suddenly aware of how much she was shaking. The adrenaline was fading, leaving exhaustion and pain in its wake. He killed them, Kael. His arms tightened, and he'll answer for it. Chapter 8. The Price of Truth. The interrogation chamber was deep in the palace's lower levels, where stone walls muffled sound and ancient magic kept prisoners contained. Sera sat in the observation room, wrapped in a thick robe, watching through the one-way glass as Kael questioned the scarred man. His name was Garrett Blackthorn, former beta of the Mountain Ridge Pack, and he wasn't talking. You understand the penalty for murdering pack members, Kael said, his voice dangerously calm. Garrett spat blood onto the floor. I regret nothing. That girl was a stain on our bloodline. Not a question, a statement of fact. Garrett's eyes were cold, fanatical. The old ways demand purity, strength. Beside Sera, Elder Mira made a sound of disgust. I've lived 73 years and seen this poison before. Wolves who value bloodline over character, tradition over compassion, Sera asked quietly, her eyes never leaving Garrett's face through the glass. At least 3, based on his companions in the courtyard, Mira said. But movements like this rarely stay small. There could be dozens sympathetic to the cause. The thought made Sera's stomach turn. All those years she'd believed she was a monster. But the real monsters were the ones who'd twisted her first shift into a weapon, who'd murdered her parents for the crime of loving across pack lines. Through the glass, Kael leaned forward, his presence overwhelming even from this distance. Give me names, Garrett, everyone involved in the conspiracy. Do this willingly, and your death will be quick. Garrett laughed, the sound harsh and mocking. You think I fear death? I fear the corruption you represent, Boy King. You, who broke the sacred laws to take the throne. You, who murdered your own father. He shook his head. The old families see what you're doing, weakening us, making us soft. Kael went very still, and even through the thick walls, Sera felt his rage spike through the mate bond. My father was a tyrant who poisoned his own son to maintain power. You broke the natural order. Garrett's smile was vicious. We tried to correct one mistake 4 years ago. The threat hung in the air. Before Sera could process it, Kael moved with blinding speed, slamming Garrett against the wall hard enough to crack stone. He released Garrett and strode from the interrogation room, his control clearly fraying. Moments later, he burst into the observation room, his silver eyes finding Sera immediately. She asked, rising from her chair. Am I? He stared at her incredulously. Sera, he just threatened to kill you, again. The words exploded out of him, raw and unfiltered. 4 years ago, they poisoned you. Today they attacked the palace, and Garrett just made it clear there are more of them, planning more attacks. So no, I'm not all right. I'm furious, terrified. Sera crossed to him, placing her hands on his chest. Through the contact, she felt the wild thunder of his heartbeat, the barely leashed violence of his wolf. But you won't. She held his gaze. You're capable of tremendous violence when protecting those you love. You're also capable of tremendous restraint when violence isn't the answer. Right now, we need the restraint version of you. Kael's hands came up to frame her face, his touch gentle despite the fury still burning in his eyes. Sera's voice shook slightly. I'm terrified, angry, confused, but I've spent 4 years running from my fear, and look where it got me. So now I'm choosing to face it head on. Something shifted in his expression, surprise, admiration, and underneath it all, something deeper, something that made her breath catch. You're incredible, he said softly. Do you know that? You just shifted for the first time in 4 years, fought off an experienced warrior, and now you're standing here telling me to be strategic instead of violent. She smiled up at him, feeling the mate bond pulse warmly between them. You showed me I wasn't a monster. Let me return the favor. You're not your father, Kael. For a moment, she thought he might kiss her. His gaze dropped to her lips, and the air between them crackled with tension. But then Mira cleared her throat pointedly from across the room. As touching as this is, the elder said dryly, we have a conspiracy to unravel. Kael pulled back reluctantly, though his hands lingered on Sera's waist. Mira's eyes gleamed with calculation. Tomorrow night is the full moon. The council expects Sera to shift before them as ordered. Absolutely not, Kael said immediately. It's too dangerous. If there are more conspirators... There are definitely more conspirators, Sera interrupted. Garrett said the old family's plural, which means this goes beyond just Mountain Ridge Pack. Kael's voice was flat. Sera turned to face him fully. Think about it. They've been operating in shadows for 4 years, confident I'd never surface, never learn the truth. But now I'm here, alive, shifted, and about to be officially recognized as your mate. She arched an eyebrow. Despite everything, Kael's lips twitched. We're mates. The word felt right on her tongue, natural. And families protect each other. You protected me by helping me reconnect with my wolf. Mira nodded approvingly. The girl makes sense. We set up the ceremony as planned, but this time we're ready for treachery. Extra guards, wards against poison, loyal pack members positioned throughout the crowd. Kael looked between them, clearly torn between his protective instincts and tactical necessity. Finally, he sighed. If we do this, and I mean if, then I'm not leaving your side for a single moment between now and the ceremony. I'm not sure the council would approve of the Alpha King bunking with an unmated female, Sera pointed out, though warmth flooded through her at the possessiveness in his tone. His silver eyes locked on hers, blazing with intensity. You're my mate, Sera, has been since the moment that bond snapped into place. The ceremony doesn't change that. The declaration hung between them, heavy with meaning. They hadn't spoken explicitly about what came after she shifted, after the conspiracy was resolved, after everything settled. But now, with his words and the fierce certainty in his gaze, Kael was making his intentions crystal clear. He wanted forever. And the terrifying, exhilarating truth was, so did she. Okay, Sera said softly. Stay with me. Protect me. Let me protect you. Together, he echoed, and sealed the promise with a kiss that tasted of blood and moonlight and the future they'd fight for. Chapter 9. The night before evening settled over the palace like a velvet cloak, stars emerging one by one against the darkening sky. Sera stood at the window of Kael's private chambers, not her assigned room in the north wing, but his own sanctuary, where he'd insisted she stay, where he could keep her safe. Behind her, she heard the quiet sounds of Kael moving through the space, securing wards, checking locks. He'd been tense since the interrogation, his wolf close to the surface, hyper-aware of every shadow and sound. You don't have to guard me every second, Sera said softly, watching his reflection in the glass. I can take care of myself. He crossed to her, his warmth a solid presence at her back. But that doesn't mean I want you to have to. Sera turned to face him, studying the lines of tension around his eyes, the tight set of his jaw. His hands came to rest on her shoulders, thumbs tracing small circles through the soft fabric of the robe she still wore. Tomorrow night we're walking into a trap of our own making. Yes, we'll be prepared. Yes, we have loyal guards and protective wards. She covered one of his hands with her own. The admission was raw, vulnerable. I just found you, Sera. The words hung between them, weighted with meaning that went beyond simple concern. This wasn't an alpha worried about a pack member. This was a man terrified of losing the other half of his soul. You won't, she promised. Kael's silver eyes searched hers, looking for doubt, for fear. Whatever he found there made something in his expression soften. I'm not fearless. She stepped closer, eliminating the space between them. But I'd rather face my fear with you than run from it alone. That's what these 4 years taught me. Running doesn't solve anything. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing across her cheekbone. Sera smiled slightly. The question was casual, but Sera felt the weight behind it. He wanted to know if her wolf accepted him, accepted this bond, accepted the future they were building together. She says, Sera began, feeling her wolf stir contentedly at his nearness, that you smell like home, like safety. Kael's breath hitched. The confession spilled out before she could second-guess it. I know it's fast. I know we barely know each other beyond trauma and conspiracy and trying to survive. But the mate bond doesn't lie, does it? For a heartbeat, Kael simply stared at her. Then he was kissing her, deep and desperate and claiming. Not the gentle press of lips from earlier, but something that spoke of possession and promise, and the fierce joy of finding something you thought was lost forever. Sera melted into him, her arms winding around his neck as his pulled her impossibly closer. Through the mate bond, she felt the tidal wave of his emotions. Desire, yes, but also relief, joy, and underneath it all, a bone-deep rightness that mirrored her own feelings. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kael rested his forehead against hers. Her fingers played with the hair at the nape of his neck, unwilling to let go completely. His voice was low, intimate. I promised I'd never let emotion cloud my judgment, that I'd rule with logic, with strategy, putting the needs of the packs above my own wants. Sera's heart clenched. He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. The moment that mate bond snapped into place, everything changed. Suddenly, the most important thing in my world wasn't pack politics or strategic alliances or maintaining order. It was keeping you safe, making you smile. I know. His laugh was shaky. Because now I have something to lose, something infinitely precious that I'd burn the world down to protect. Understanding dawned. His hands tightened on her waist. What if I'm so focused on flushing out the conspiracy that I miss something? Sera took his face in both hands, forcing him to focus on her. Listen to me, you are not your father. Your father made decisions based on paranoia and a desire for control. You're making this decision based on logic and necessity. Yes, you want to protect me, but you also recognize that hiding doesn't solve anything. That's wisdom, Kael. She smiled. Because unlike you, I don't have years of experience second-guessing myself as a leader. I just have my gut, and my gut says that you're exactly the alpha this territory needs. Kael studied her for a long moment, and she watched some of the tension drain from his shoulders. Make everything seem manageable. He brushed a strand of hair back from her face. Sera rose on her toes to press a soft kiss to his jaw. Because you're stuck with me now. She kissed his other jaw. You helped me find my wolf, showed me I wasn't a monster. Another kiss, this one to the corner of his mouth. I'm not letting you go, Alpha King. The possessive declaration made Kael's eyes flash with heat. He captured her mouth in another searing kiss, and this time when they broke apart, there was no fear in his expression, only hunger, determination, and something that looked dangerously close to love. We should rest, he said, though his hands hadn't moved from her waist. We should, Sera agreed, not moving either. They stood there, wrapped in each other, neither willing to break the contact. Finally, Kael smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine. He took her hand, leading her toward the massive bed that dominated one side of the chamber. Sera laughed, the sound lighter than she'd felt in years. His eyes promised more. Later, when the danger had passed, when they had time to explore this bond properly. I want to do this right, Sera. Court you. Learn everything about you. The consideration, the respect for her autonomy, even in the face of overwhelming attraction, made her chest ache with affection. He pulled back the covers, gesturing for her to climb in. They settled into bed together, Sera tucked against his side with her head on his chest, his arm wrapped securely around her. Outside, the moon climbed higher, growing fuller with each passing hour. Tomorrow night, it would be complete, the full moon under which she'd shift before the council and flush out the conspiracy that had stolen her life. But tonight, wrapped in the warmth of her mate's embrace, Sera felt only peace. "Tell me something," she murmured against his chest. Kael was quiet for a moment, his hand tracing idle patterns on her shoulder. "When I killed my father, the last thing he said to me was that I'd never be strong enough to hold the throne." Sera's arm tightened around his waist. "For 6 years, I've been proving him wrong." His voice dropped to barely a whisper. "But alone, always alone." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "And I realize he was wrong about everything. Loving someone doesn't make you weak. It makes you stronger." Tears pricked Sera's eyes. "I love you too," she whispered. "I know it's too soon to say it, but I do." Kael's entire body went still, then he was shifting them, rolling until he hovered over her, his silver eyes blazing with emotion. She smiled up at him through her tears. "My mate, my alpha." And there, in the quiet sanctuary of his chambers with the moon as their witness, they sealed their bond not with passion, but with tenderness, gentle kisses, whispered confessions, and the simple joy of two wounded souls finally finding their way home. Chapter 10: The Ceremony of Truth. The grand hall had been transformed. Gone were the crystal chandeliers and marble floors. In their place, the ancient ceremonial circle had been carved directly into the earth, a perfect ring of silver-white stone that gleamed under the full moon streaming through the opened ceiling. Torches ringed the space, their flames dancing in the mountain wind. Every alpha, beta, and elder from the northern territories had gathered, hundreds of wolves, their eyes reflecting firelight, their bodies tense with anticipation. The air was thick with power, with the weight of tradition stretching back centuries, and at the center of it all stood Sera. She wore the traditional white ceremonial robes, her feet bare against cold stone, her hair unbound and flowing past her shoulders. On the outside, she appeared calm, but inside her wolf paced restlessly, sensing the danger that lurked among the crowd. "They're here," her wolf warned. "The ones who hurt us. I can smell their hate." "I know," Sera responded silently. "Let them come. We're ready this time." Kael stood at the edge of the circle, positioned as witness rather than participant, as tradition demanded, but his silver eyes never left her, and through the mate bond she felt his steady presence. An anchor, a promise. "I'm here," he sent through their connection. "Whatever happens, I'm here." Elder Mira stepped forward, her voice carrying across the assembled crowd. "We gather under the full moon to witness the transformation of Sera Ashford, daughter of the Silver Moon Pack and the Mountain Ridge bloodline. 4 years have passed since her first shift." A murmur rippled through the crowd, some curious, some hostile. Sera could feel the weight of their judgment, their suspicion. "Let it be known," Mira continued, her aged voice strong, "that this ceremony is sacred." Kael nodded once, his expression carved from stone, but Sera saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands clenched at his sides. He was ready to move at the first sign of trouble. Mira turned to Sera. "Child, are you prepared to embrace your wolf?" Sera's voice rang clear across the hall. The elder began to chant in the old language, words that predated modern pacts, that called to the primal magic woven into every shifter's blood. The torches flared higher, the circle began to glow with inner light, and Sera closed her eyes, reaching for her wolf. She came willingly this time, rising to meet Sera with eagerness rather than fear. Together they began the transformation, bones shifting, muscles reforming, skin giving way to silver-white fur. But something was wrong. Pain lanced through Sera's body, sharp and chemical and horrifyingly familiar. Her eyes snapped open, glowing amber in the torchlight, and through the agony she felt it. Poison. Just like 4 years ago, someone had poisoned her again. No! Her wolf howled. Not again! Fight it! Sera gritted her teeth, forcing herself to continue the shift even as the poison burned through her veins. She wouldn't let them win. Wouldn't let them turn her transformation into a weapon. Through the mate bond, she felt Kael's surge of fury and alarm. He moved toward the circle, but Mira stopped him with a raised hand. Wait, the elder commanded. She's fighting it. The shift completed, and Sera stood on 4 legs, her silver-white wolf form trembling with the effort of maintaining control. The poison wanted her to rage, to attack, to become the monster they'd tried to create 4 years ago. But she wasn't alone this time. Sera. Kael's voice came through the bond, steady and strong. Focus on me. Feel the connection between us. Let it anchor you. She fixed her glowing eyes on him, and the mate bond flared like a lifeline thrown across turbulent water. The poison was strong, but the bond was stronger. Now, Kael said quietly. It wasn't a shout, wasn't even particularly loud, but something in his tone carried absolute authority, not just an alpha command, but something deeper, something that resonated with the ancient magic in the circle itself. Chaos erupted. From 3 different points in the crowd, wolves lunged toward the circle. Not just any wolves, pack members wearing ceremonial robes, trusted members of the council. The conspirators revealing themselves at last, but Kael's guards were ready. They intercepted 2 of the attackers before they reached the circle's edge. The third, however, was faster, older, more desperate. Elder Thorn from the Mountain Ridge pack broke through the line, his form shifting mid-leap into a massive gray wolf, the same size as Garrett, the same vicious intent. He crashed into the circle and straight into Sera. The impact should have sent her sprawling, should have given him the advantage. But Sera had spent 4 years running, 4 years building strength in her legs and speed in her reflexes. She twisted away from his jaws, her smaller size making her agile where he was powerful. Our fight, her wolf snarled. He helped kill our parents. He poisoned us. He dies. But even through the rage and the poison burning in her veins, Sera remembered Kael's words. You're not a monster. Neither is your wolf. She had the perfect excuse to kill. The poison, the attack, the threat to her life, any wolf would be justified in tearing out Elder Thorn's throat. But she wasn't any wolf. She was Sera Ashford, and she'd spent 4 years believing she was a murderer. She wouldn't become one now, not even for vengeance. Instead, she used her speed and agility to stay 1 step ahead, dodging his attacks, wearing him down. Through the bond, she felt Kael's pride, his fierce joy at her choice. The other conspirators were subdued quickly, guards swarming them, binding them with silver chains that suppressed their wolves. But Thorn kept fighting, kept trying to reach Sera with single-minded determination. Until Kael entered the circle. The Alpha King shifted mid-stride, his massive black wolf form even more impressive than in the gardens. He didn't attack Thorn directly. Instead, he positioned himself between the Elder and Sera, his silver eyes blazing with challenge. Mine, his presence declared. You want her. You go through me. Thorn, exhausted and outmatched, finally faltered. He shifted back to human form, collapsing to his knees on the ceremonial stone. It should have worked, he gasped, blood flecking his lips. The poison should have made her lose control, should have proven she's dangerous. Kael shifted back as well, standing over the Elder with lethal grace. Justified murdering an innocent girl? Thorn's laugh was bitter. Innocent? Her very existence is a crime against our bloodlines. Mixed heritage weakens us, makes us vulnerable. The old ways. The old ways, Sera interrupted, shifting back to human form, though her body still trembled from the poison's effects. Died with my parents, who you murdered. She stood before him, naked and bloodied but unbowed. Around them, the assembled packs watched in stunned silence. I am Sera Ashford, she declared, her voice ringing across the hall. Daughter of Lissa and Marcus, born of 2 bloodlines, and I am not weak. I am not corrupted. She turned to face the crowd, meeting the eyes of hundreds of wolves. For 4 years, I believed I was a monster, that my wolf was dangerous, that I'd killed my own pack in madness. Mira stepped forward, her voice carrying ancient authority. The council has witnessed the truth. Elder Torin and his conspirators stand accused of murder, conspiracy, and the unlawful use of Midnight Thorn poison. A roar of approval rose from the crowd, not universal, Sera noticed, but overwhelming. The old guard might have sympathizers, but the majority of wolves wanted justice, not bloodline purity. Kael moved to Sera's side, placing his formal robe around her shoulders. Through the bond, she felt his concern for her physical state, the poison still working through her system. "You need the silver water," he murmured. Sera nodded, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline was fading, leaving only pain and the creeping effects of the poison. But she'd done it. She'd shifted before the council, fought off an attack, and exposed the conspiracy. She'd reclaimed her life. As guards dragged Torin and the other conspirators away, as the crowd began to disperse with excited murmurs, Kael scooped Sera into his arms. "The ceremony isn't finished," she protested weakly. His voice was firm, brooking no argument. "You've proven everything that needed proving." He carried her toward the exit, his stride purposeful. "You're my mate, Sera. That supersedes protocol." Through the bond, she felt his fear. The poison was stronger than expected, working faster. She had minutes, maybe less.